Little Mix.
Mm.
Hmm. Little Mix. Uh, so interestingly enough, did you ever watch The X Factor?
Fuck no. Come on, dog. If there's one thing that is so played into ground, it's watching people sing and like become champions at that. Like I'm just so over it. And it's like talent shows. I'm all about talent shows if you exclude singing and dancing and do
Hmm.
other talents, you know? But
So
that's not what people like.
so you would be into like America's Got Talent because a comedian wins almost every single year, or a magician. It's like one of those two.
Yeah. That yeah, exactly. Like
Okay.
yeah.
So X Factor in what 2011 they
UK
brought
X Factor, right?
yeah UK X Factor. Simon Cowell pretty much brought this band together. Little Mix, and they dropped their fifth album this past weekend called LM5. Very creative name, obviously. It's interesting because I was doing a little bit of research about them. I hadn't really heard much about this group. They're pretty enormous over in the UK. Like their last album in 2016, Glory Days, was on the top 40 charts for like almost 90 weeks. It's pretty absurd. I mean, that's basically since it's been put out, it's been a top 40 album. And it seems like a couple of their singles off that album have really propelled it to stay on the list. So I'm wondering, why haven't I heard of this group? And maybe listening to this album told me a little bit about it. There wasn't really anything that stood out to me about this album, anything that really caught my attention. It seemed very like paint by numbers pop album for the time. Um, the way you pitched this group to me was what they're kind of like. What was the band that you used?
Fifth Harmony.
Yeah, you're like the UK version of Fifth Harmony. Fifth Harmony blows these guys out of the water in my book. I find them so much more interesting, and their vocals so much more interesting, especially. What did you think of this Little Mix album and just them as a group in general?
Yeah, well, I think that's how they came into my orbit a few years ago. Was just I was reading something about Fifth Harmony, a U.S. based pop
Mm.
quintet that was put together via a singing reality competition, and the piece was constructed something along the lines. Fifth Harmony, but do you know Little Mix? They're very similar. You probably like them too. Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason they didn't make as much inroads in the U.S., at least until recently, is partially because of Fifth Harmony's dominance at the time. They've since split up and have gone solo. So I think that space of girl group, pop group, they're in the same lane, so they were just kind of occupying their own sides of the Atlantic, I guess. And also, you know, you spoke to it, the sounds of Fifth Harmony. I think there's unique sounds. Everyone knows Camila Cabello. Normani is also popping off, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can easily identify that. And I don't think for Little Mix, at least not yet, we have quite that like singular vocals that you can like pick out. And ultimately, it is lazy just to compare them just to Fifth Harmony,
Mm-hmm.
But if we're just thinking about them in broadly pop music, thinking like the pop records we've talked about this year, Robin recently, Ariana Grande, Camilla. Um, I think like you said, Little Mix is more, I don't say generic, but doesn't stand out from the pack as much as those other records did earlier in the year. And I think that's probably what's hurt them with branching out beyond their big UK base, which is established and, like you said, very successful. I think they've had their moments. Songs like Black Magic, I think, is really good.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't really have that many songs jump out at me on LM5. And well, I think some of these will inevitably do big streaming numbers, like pop groups usually do. Um, I don't know if this would do much to grow their base over here. I mean, the lead single was with Nicki Minaj. Obviously, that's a play for the states, but I think that song's fine. I don't know how successful it'll be, but I mean, what was your read as someone who you know is familiar with Fifth Harmony and has listened to plenty of pop this year? I mean, did you really see anything that could pop out to you?
The thing I think that stood out most to me was how much they seem to be trying to find a hit that will really catch on in America. Like Wasabi or what was the other one that sounded like Wasabi? Oh, Stripper. Like those two songs sound very almost like Migos influence or like hip hop influence, where they're trying
Radio
almost like
plays for
rapping.
sure.
Yeah, and they're going with a very specific sound. You know, they had "Love a Girl Right," which kind of infused this like Latin, almost like Carlos Santana mixed with like Rob Thomas type sound to it, and it's
Very
not
trendy.
smooth. I'll put it that way. Um, it it's just like they were like, we're gonna put out this type of song or this type of
Yeah.
song and see which one really like caught, and it just left me feeling like they didn't really have an identity that they feel comfortable with, that they're trying to like, almost kind of like the conversation we were having with underachievers, where they're trying to find whatever will propel them to that next level, and for them it's the next level here in the United States.
Mhm.
Which I don't knock the hustle, but I would much rather hear something like, you know, another Black Magic, not the same thing, obviously, but evolving in that sound rather than just trying to find whatever
Right.
will catch on here. Be true to yourself, I guess, is
Yeah.
like the main thing. Although I gotta say, The Cure, very catchy song that definitely stuck with me. If I had to pick one song off the album, that'd be the one I come back to. Any that really hit for you?
I thought Joan of Arc was interesting. Just, I mean, there's a few moments here on this album, the song with Nicki as well, where like there's, you know,
Mm,
female empowerment themes, feminist themes in general. But ultimately, I feel like a lot of times they're pretty surface level, and
mhm,
it's like they're not actually saying as much as you think when you first start listening to it. Um, so again, those are songs that I probably wouldn't go back to as much. But yeah, I think you hit it. Like there are songs on here that are just straight up catchy. It's catchy pop music.
mhm.
And, you know, there's a science to it in a certain degree. Right? I think Ed Sheeran actually wrote a song or two on this as well.
Yeah.
So you know, uh, they'll be fine off this against their fifth album. They're going to do big numbers. But like you said, I don't know if there was much artistic ambition on LM5, unfortunately.